Hello and welcome to this presentation about ethical frameworks. Now, ethical frameworks isn't explicitly mentioned in the study design, but ethics does come up in a couple of instances. It comes up in regards to the ethics of using generative AI, and it comes up with ethical problems that can come up with using, manipulating and communicating data. So I figure if you're going to talk about ethics, you probably should have some idea of what we mean by the term ethics. So this is more expansive than you're going to need for the exam, and it's probably more expansive than you're going to need for any of the assessment tasks. But if you're interested in a very quick overview of how ethics work, then stay with me. I'm going through 6 popular frameworks. Deontological, I'm probably mispronouncing some of these. I did study ethics in first year university, but that was in 1989, and I was not a very good student. I confess that I found it dull. I'm embarrassed by that, but I did find it dull and I very nearly failed it. Consequentialism is probably the best known. Virtue ethics, probably not very popular these days. Divine command theory, I would say, is alive and well. Authority-based ethics, I would say, is alive and well. And social contract ethics. I would actually say all 6 of these frameworks are alive and well, which is part of the reason why I've picked them. So, deontological ethics is a duty-based system of ethics. That there is Immanuel Kant, or Kant, I'm not sure how we pronounce that in Australia. And we talk about the duties that people have. And so the rightness or wrongness of an action is based on whether adhering to our rules and duties and principles rather than the consequences of those actions. So it's about the duties we have rather than who does or doesn't get hurt. Or fed, or any of these things, although some of these duties probably would lead us to what we would recognise as moral actions. So moral agents have duties and obligations. Certain actions are inherently right or wrong, regardless of their outcomes. So, if you were to kill somebody, then you might say that that is always wrong, regardless of whether you're doing it to save a life. And the morality depends on whether it follows particular principles. And some actions, I imagine including murder, are forbidden even when they might produce good consequences. So that's deontological ethics. Consequentialism is the one that you've probably heard of from either Batman or The Good Life. And if you look at the image there, the greatest good for the greatest number. So if we decide how to use our efforts, then presumably we use them to feed and house and look after the greatest number of people, or do what is right for them. It might not be about food and housing. So the morality of an action is based solely on its outcomes or consequences. So if you have to kill one person to save 10, well, then you're up 9 lives, and so you did the morally right thing. As opposed to our previous one, we would say that you have a duty not to kill people, and therefore, or maybe not to kill innocent people, and therefore you shouldn't do it even if it's saving lives. The most common form of this is known as utilitarianism. I would say they're often equated with each other, but utilitarianism is a form of consequentialism. And utilitarianism says the most ethical action is the one that produces the greatest good for the greatest number of people. Famous version of this, of course, is the trolley problem, that unless you switch tracks, then 5 people will die. If you switch tracks and you make a decision to kill that person, then 1 person dies. And thank you to Sketch Planations, who I have taken this image from. Now, we have virtue ethics, and there we have Socrates having to give us a little talk about that. Sorry, it's not Socrates here, although Aristotle did know Socrates. He was a student of his. But virtue ethics originated with ancient Greek philosophers, and most notably Aristotle, and that's Aristotle there. The central idea of this is that ethical behaviour comes from having good character traits. So if you're a good person, if you are good, then the way you behave is you do good things. So they're good by virtue of you choosing to do them by being a good person. So a person who cultivates their virtues will naturally make ethical decisions. The virtues. There's positive character traits such as honesty, courage, fairness and compassion, and I think I'd agree with those. Vices such as dishonesty, cowardice and selfishness. I feel like this is called eudaimonia, but I could be wrong, and it is the virtue of living well. And finally, there is practical wisdom, what Heck from Hunt from the Wilder People might call the knack, which is the ability to discern the right course of action in specific situations. So if you have this, you just can tell what's the right thing to do. So that's virtue ethics. Also quite popular is the divine command theory. And this is that we know something is right because God tells us that it's right. Now, there are, of course, all sorts of gods in play. In this context, you're probably most familiar with the monotheistic Christian and Jewish God, but there are other gods in play, and this applies to all of them. What is good because God says it's good, and it does. All ethical truths are true regardless of anything else because this is God's will. Human beings can discover morality through religious revelation or scripture in this instance, or because, their religious organisation told them to. Now, this is... who is this? This is Plato. I'm pretty sure this is Plato. Actually, you know what? Let's have a quick look, because now I'm uncertain. So what are we looking at? We're looking at the ethical framework of divine command. So... divine, because I don't want to tell you the wrong person. Let's have a look at you. There you go. So this is, I'm just looking at the name of the file because it's got the name of the person in it. Plato. Yeah, this is Plato having a chat with the Greek gods. So this was 300 or 400 years before the birth of Christ. So it's possible that in that time somebody could have been thinking about the God of Judaism, but in his particular context he would have been talking about what we think of as the ancient Greek gods. So the question is something good because God commands it to be good, or does God command it to be good because it is good? Like, is it just that God knows the truth, he's not commanding it, he just can tell, he's the great arbiter of it, and he can tell that it's good? If the first option is true, it's good because he commands it, then anything could be theoretically good so long as God commanded it. If the second option is true, goodness exists independently of God and it undermines the theory's foundation. I feel like this is all a little bit of nitpicking. I think if you want to say that God can tell the right from wrong, I don't think it really matters if it's independently or whether it's because God decrees it, up to you really. But this is the divine command theory. Authority-based ethics. Now, before I get into authority-based ethics, I have to say, when you read it on the page, it sounds a little bit like a cult or an authoritarian state. But in actual fact, we use authority-based ethics quite a lot. Moral guidance comes from external sources rather than individual. And you don't need to reason things out. You just say, well, what does the authority say? And again, it doesn't sound great on first blush. So you can get it from religious texts or religious leaders. You can get it from legal systems and government bodies. You can say, well, I trust that this body, this parliament, this leader knows what's best. But on perhaps what I would think of as a more benign level, you can look at professional codes of conduct and just say, listen, smarter people than me who've thought about this a lot think that this is the way to do it. I think of this as things like, the school uniform. You know what, I don't know that I have a particularly moral stance on whether students should wear a school uniform, but it's the rules of the road in the schools that I work in. You know what, I'm okay enforcing it. And organisational policies and management hierarchy, because the boss said. Now, of course, you can get yourself into real trouble with this. The Nuremberg defence of, I was just following orders. This one's very interesting. This can lead to some very dark outcomes and some very pedestrian outcomes. But that's what it's called, authority-based ethics. And of course, you can refer to your cultural traditions. We have always done it this way. And the elders tell us that this is good. The final one is the social contract theory. And I confess this one probably resonates best with me. So, moral rules and social obligations are an agreement among members of society. Now, they might be an implicit agreement. I don't think they're necessarily an explicit agreement, But you know what? There's nothing morally good or bad about a green traffic light or a red traffic light or the speed limit, except that we agree to trade away some individual freedom for some social order. Now, how much each of us has a part, I think if you look at it at a sort of individual level, you can say, well, I never agreed to trade this off. But I think as a society, we can say, well, we kind of have an implicit trade-off here. So it assumes that our just rational self-interest, I want to be okay, therefore I'll agree to cooperate with other people. That rules emerge from negotiation and agreement. That, you know, we agree not to kill each other because we don't want to live in a world where people are killing each other left, right and centre. In fact, I think we'd probably like to live in a world where they're not killing each other at all. Obligations exist because individuals consent to them. Now, you could argue that till you're blue in the face, but this is what the theory holds. And breaking the contract undermines the benefits that everybody receives. So, you know, when we speed, you take safety away from yourself and you take it away from others. When we kill people, then we take our own well-being away, because then we're increasing the likelihood that somebody will kill us. But it also affects other people. So that's what social contract theory is. And it says that the contract should be fair to all parties involved. So let's have a look at what we know. These are pretty easy questions, and there's 10 of them. So first of all, we're going to identify which of these traditions or these frameworks this belongs to. So we should implement the new workplace policy because it will produce the greatest benefit for the largest number of employees, even if a few individuals might be inconvenienced. Which of those is that? Well, that's consequentialism. That's about the greatest good for the greatest number of people. Yep, consequentialism. Lying is always wrong, regardless of the consequences, so we know it's not consequentialism. Even if telling the truth causes harm, we have a moral duty to be honest. Well, we know it's not consequentialism. The moral duty makes me think that it's deontological, that's it. Authority-based ethics would be saying, well, this person tells us that lying is wrong, and the social contract would be, well, if I lie, I can't really count on other people not lying to me. So I'm going to go with deontological, and there you go. All right. A truly ethical person demonstrates courage, wisdom, temperance, and justice in their daily life. We should focus on developing these character traits rather than following rules. Okay, so this one is about our traits or virtues. I'm reading between the lines. So I think that deontological is a candidate for this. Consequentialism isn't, because it is about following the rule of the greatest benefit. I think virtue is a better fit than deontological because it's about character traits rather than duties. And social contract really isn't about character traits at all. It's just about being practical. So I think that it's C. There you go. I'm right. Mind you, I'd want to be. I only wrote this a few minutes ago. The company's code of conduct must be followed because senior management has established these guidelines. Their position of leadership gives them the authority to determine what is right and wrong in the organisation. Now, I have to say, in 2025, this sort of presentation is terribly unpopular. If you were to say this in an organisation, you would get quite a bit of pushback from people because they kind of... I'm trying to think of a way of saying this that doesn't sound cynical. The flavour of our times is to pretend that this stuff comes from the ground up, that it's democratic, that it's in fact that it's the will of the people, that where in fact the leadership is just reflecting the will of the people rather than their own will and judgment. But let's just operate it on face value. Virtue ethics. Well, no, not really. Virtue ethics would say, let's all be virtuous and we won't need rules. We know what to do is right and wrong. Authority, yeah, I think it's authority. We're basically saying, hey, our betters think this. Consequentialism, nah. And divine command theory. Divine command theory is not really all that different to authority-based ethics. You're just saying the authority is a deity. So the answer to that, I'm pretty certain, is B. Oh, really? No, that's wrong. It's not virtue. It's not virtue ethics. I've typed that in wrong. It's authority-based ethics. Okay, We are morally obligated to follow God's commands as revealed in Scripture. Actions are right because God commands them. Well, that one's pretty easy. That's divine command theory. And again, I've written the wrong answer in. Good Lord. I'm demonstrating the fallibility of humans, or in particular this human. People in a society implicitly agree to follow certain rules and surrender some freedoms in exchange for protection and social order. Well, that's easy. That's social contract theory. Oh, good. I put the right answer in that time. The morality of an action is determined solely by its outcomes. Okay, well, that's consequentialism. We must respect the categorical imperative. Okay, act only according to principles that you could will to become universal laws. So, if it's good for me, it's good for everyone. Never treat people merely as a means to an end, but always an end in themselves. Okay, I don't think that's certainly not consequentialism. It could be duties. I don't think it's virtues, because virtues thinks about you being a good person rather than actual laws, and a social contract theory. So I think it's deontological, and it is. Okay. It's worth keeping in mind when you do come to your exams that sometimes you just have to kind of rule things out to get yourself as close as you can to the best answer. Rather than calculating outcomes or following rigid rules, we should ask, what would a person of good character do in this situation? Okay, well, that is virtue ethics. If I'm a good person, then I will just know what to do. Yep. All right, we must be getting towards the end here. Actually, I think this is the last one. Citizens have a moral duty to obey the law because by living in this society, we are tacitly consented to abide by its rules. That's social contract theory. Okay, now that's the end of that presentation. I hope you did well in the questions, and I hope that gives you an idea of kind of what we mean by ethics and how there are different ways to look at these questions.